October 28, 1940, 3 in the morning. Athens is dark and quiet. Most of its people are asleep, unaware that in the next few hours, their country will be at war. The Italian ambassador, Emanuele Grazzi, steps out of his car and knocks on the door of the Greek Prime Minister's residence. He is carrying an ultimatum from Benito Mussolini. Italy demands the right to occupy strategic positions across Greece: ports, airfields, key infrastructure. Metaxas has 3 hours to respond. Yannis Metaxas, 69 years old, a career soldier, the man who has led Greece through some of its darkest years, reads the document carefully. Then he looks up at the ambassador and says one word: "Ohi." No. In Rome, Mussolini is not worried. Greece is a small country. Italy has one of the largest armies in Europe. His generals promise him the campaign will be over in 2 weeks. Within hours, Italian forces cross the Albanian border and march into the mountains of northwestern Greece. What happens next is not in anyone's plans. The Greeks don't retreat, they don't negotiate, they fight. And within days it becomes clear that something has gone catastrophically wrong for Italy. The Greeks are not just holding their ground, they are counterattacking. For 5 months, a nation of 7 million people humiliates one of the great powers of Europe in front of the entire world. It is one of the most extraordinary military upsets of the Second World War. And it costs Greece everything. Because when you humiliate Mussolini, you eventually answer to Hitler. On April 6, 1941, the bill comes due.
To understand why Italy attacked Greece, you have to understand Mussolini's ambitions in the Mediterranean. By the fall of 1940, Hitler had conquered Poland, France, Denmark, Norway, and the Low Countries. Germany dominated Europe. And Mussolini, who considered himself an equal partner in the Axis, was watching from the sidelines, growing increasingly frustrated that Italy had nothing to show for its alliance with Berlin. He wanted his own victories, his own conquered territories, his own place in the new European order. Greece seemed like the perfect target. It was small, it was poorly armed by the standards of 1940, it had no powerful allies willing to defend it, and it sat in exactly the part of the Mediterranean where Mussolini wanted to extend Italian influence: the Balkans, the Aegean, the eastern approaches to the sea he called Mare Nostrum, our sea. He didn't even tell Hitler about his plans in advance. This was deliberate. Mussolini was tired of being treated like a junior partner. He wanted to present Germany with a fait accompli, a conquered Greece, an expanded Italian empire, proof that Rome could act independently and win. Hitler found out about the invasion the same morning it began. He was furious. Not because he opposed Italian expansion, but because the timing was catastrophic. Germany was deep in planning for Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. The last thing Hitler needed was instability in the Balkans, a new front, a new set of problems created by an ally who couldn't wait. But the invasion had already started. There was nothing to do but watch. The Italian force that crossed into Greece on October 28th numbered approximately 87,000 men. They moved through the Pindus Mountains in northwestern Greece, some of the most difficult terrain in all of Europe. Narrow passes, steep ridges, roads that were barely paths, weather that was already turning cold. The Italian commander, General Sebastiano Visconti Prasca, had assured Mussolini that the Greeks would collapse almost immediately, that the terrain wouldn't matter because resistance would be minimal, that the operation was essentially a march, not a battle. He was wrong about almost everything. The Greek army waiting for them was smaller, approximately 35,000 men in the initial defensive positions. But these were soldiers fighting on their own ground, in mountains they knew intimately, defending their own homes and families. And they were commanded by General Alexandros Papagos, a tough, methodical officer who had studied the terrain carefully and positioned his forces exactly where the Italian advance would be funneled by the mountains into killing grounds. The Italian advance stalled almost immediately. Units that were supposed to be in the Greek interior within days found themselves pinned down in mountain passes by defenders who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Supply lines that had seemed adequate on paper fell apart in the reality of the Albanian mountain roads. Communication between Italian units broke down. Officers who had been promised an easy campaign found themselves fighting for individual ridgelines against an enemy that refused to yield. Within a week, the Italian offensive had ground to a halt. Within 2 weeks, the Greeks were counterattacking, and General Papagos, watching the Italian lines buckle and stretch under the pressure of his forces, gave the order to push.
November 1940. The Italian army is retreating. Not slowly, not in good order, not in the controlled manner that military planners describe as a tactical withdrawal. They are being pushed back through the same mountain passes they had marched through just weeks earlier, but now in the opposite direction, in worsening weather, under constant pressure from Greek forces that are moving faster and hitting harder than anyone in Rome had thought possible. General Papagos has unleashed 3 Greek divisions along a front stretching across the Pindus Mountains. His plan is aggressive and straightforward. Find the weakest points in the Italian line, break through, and turn the flanks of the units that are still holding. Make the entire Italian position untenable, not just uncomfortable. It works. The Italian Giulia Division, one of Rome's elite Alpine units, soldiers specifically trained for mountain warfare, finds itself surrounded and nearly destroyed in the Pindus Mountains within the first week of the Greek counterattack. Men who had been promised a triumphant march through Greece are fighting for survival in terrain so brutal that the cold and the snow are as dangerous as the enemy. The Giulia Division suffers catastrophic losses before it manages to break out of the encirclement. It will never fully recover.
As November turns to December, the scale of the Greek success becomes impossible to ignore. Greek forces cross the Albanian border, pushing the war back onto territory that Italy has controlled since 1939. Town after town falls. Girocaster, Sarande, Korce. Names that mean nothing to most of the world, but represent shocking proof that a small Balkan nation is defeating a major European power in open battle. The Greek soldiers fighting in these mountains are not equipped for what they are doing. They lack adequate winter clothing. Their supply lines are primitive. In many cases, mules are the only way to move ammunition and food through the mountain terrain. Their artillery is outdated. Their air force is tiny and outmatched. None of it matters. What they have is something that cannot be requisitioned or manufactured. They are fighting for their homes, for their families, for the country that has existed on this land for 3,000 years. Every man in those mountains understands exactly what is at stake and fights accordingly. In Athens, the mood is extraordinary. People who had gone to sleep on October 27th as citizens of a neutral country trying to stay out of a war that was consuming the rest of Europe wake up as a nation at war and discover to their own astonishment that they are winning. Volunteers flood recruiting offices. Women organize supply networks to get food and equipment to the front. School children collect warm clothing for soldiers in the mountains. The entire country mobilizes with a speed and unity that its government had not dared to hope for.
In London, Winston Churchill watches the news from Greece with something approaching disbelief. In a war where Britain has been absorbing defeat after defeat, Dunkirk, the fall of France, the Blitz, here is a small allied nation not just resisting, but advancing, not just surviving, but winning. He sends a message to the Greek government. It says simply, "We are proud to be your allies." In Rome, Mussolini is not sending congratulatory messages to anyone. He has already fired General Visconti Prasca and replaced him with a new commander, then fired that commander and replaced him with another, then another. The revolving door of Italian generals in Albania becomes a dark joke across Europe, proof that the problem in Greece is not the commanders, but the entire premise of the operation. By the end of 1940, Greek forces control approximately 1/4 of Albania. The Italian army has lost over 38,000 men, killed, wounded, or captured, and there is no end in sight. Mussolini's 2-week war has become a catastrophe, and in Berlin, Adolf Hitler has seen enough.
By the beginning of 1941, Adolf Hitler has a problem he didn't ask for and doesn't have time for. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, is scheduled for May 1941. It is the most ambitious military operation in human history. 3 million soldiers, 3 army groups, a front stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Everything Hitler has been building towards since he wrote Mein Kampf in a prison cell in 1924. And now, because Mussolini couldn't wait, because Mussolini needed his own victory, because Mussolini attacked Greece without telling anyone, the entire southern flank of Hitler's planned Soviet invasion is destabilized. A German ally is being humiliated in the mountains of Albania. British forces are beginning to arrive in Greece to support their ally. The Balkans, a region Hitler needed to be quiet, stable, and firmly under Axis control before he turned east, are becoming a crisis. Hitler makes his decision. Germany will invade Greece. Not because he wants to, not because Greece was ever part of his strategic vision, but because he cannot launch Barbarossa with an unstable southern flank, because he cannot allow Britain to establish a foothold in southeastern Europe, and because the spectacle of Italian humiliation is damaging Axis credibility across the continent. The operation is called Val Marita, Case Marita. To execute it, Germany needs something Greece has been counting on as its primary protection, the Yugoslav buffer zone to the north. Germany needs to move forces through Yugoslavia to attack Greece from multiple directions simultaneously. This brings Hitler to a second problem.
Yugoslavia. In March 1941, Hitler pressures the Yugoslav government into signing the Tripartite Pact, joining the Axis. The Yugoslav regent, Prince Paul, reluctantly agrees. He understands that refusing Germany is probably suicidal. 2 days later, Serbian military officers stage a coup in Belgrade. They tear up the pact. They declare Yugoslavia's neutrality. The crowds in Belgrade pour into the streets celebrating. People throw flowers at British embassy windows. Hitler is told the news at 3 in the morning. He is enraged in a way that people who know him describe as beyond anything they have seen before. He calls an immediate conference of his military chiefs and issues a series of orders. Yugoslavia will be destroyed, not just defeated, destroyed, politically and militarily obliterated, as a warning to every other country in Europe about what happens when you defy the Reich. The invasion of both Yugoslavia and Greece is now scheduled simultaneously. April 6, 1941. For Greece, this changes everything. The Greek army has been fighting Italy for 5 months. Its best divisions are in Albania, holding the line against an Italian force that, despite its failures, still vastly outnumbers the Greeks. General Papagakos has used almost every reserve unit available to maintain the pressure on the Albanian front.
When Germany attacks from the north through Yugoslavia, there will be almost nothing in the way. Papagos and the British commander in Greece, General Henry Maitland Wilson, look at the maps and understand what they are facing. Not one enemy, but 2. Not one front, but 3. The Italians in Albania, the Germans coming through Yugoslavia in the north, and the Bulgarian border to the northeast, where more German forces are already massing. The British have sent approximately 58,000 troops to Greece, a force that Churchill authorized in the hope of building a Balkan front against the Axis. They have tanks, artillery, and air support. On paper, it looks meaningful. Against the force Germany is about to unleash, it is not enough. Not even close. On the evening of April 5, 1941, the night before the German invasion, Greek soldiers in their positions along the northern border can hear the sound of engines in the darkness. Thousands of them, coming from the north.
April 6, 1941. Dawn. Germany attacks on 3 fronts simultaneously. From Bulgaria in the northeast, the 12th Army under Field Marshal Wilhelm List drives into Greek Macedonia. From Yugoslavia in the north, armored columns pour through mountain passes that the defenders had assumed would protect them. And along the entire length of the Yugoslav-Greek border, German infantry and tanks move with the speed and coordination that has already conquered half of Europe. The Luftwaffe appears over Greek cities before most people are awake. Thessaloniki, Greece's second-largest city, is bombed in the first hours of the invasion. The port, the railway junction, the military installations. Within 24 hours, German forces are approaching the city from the land as well. The Greek garrison defending Eastern Macedonia, the Eastern Macedonian Army under Lieutenant General Konstantinos Bakopoulos, faces an impossible situation. They are cut off from the main Greek force in Albania by the speed of the German advance. They are surrounded on 3 sides. They have no air cover. They have no hope of relief. Bakopoulos holds for 2 days. His men fight from prepared positions against an enemy that has more tanks, more aircraft, and more artillery than the entire Greek military. They exact a cost from every German unit that comes against them, but the outcome is never really in doubt. On April 9th, Thessaloniki falls. 23,000 Greek soldiers march into German captivity. Bakopoulos later says that his men did everything that could be asked of soldiers in their situation. He is right.
Meanwhile, to the west, the situation is unraveling in a way that nobody anticipated. The Metaxas Line, a series of fortifications along the Bulgarian border that Greece has spent years and enormous resources building, is proving exactly as effective as its designers had hoped. German forces attacking the Metaxas Line directly are stopped cold. Fort Rupel, Fort Aquinos, Fort Istabe, the garrisons of these positions hold against repeated German assaults with a ferocity that earns the respect of the attacking forces. One German officer later writes that the defenders of the Metaxas Line fought with a courage he had not encountered anywhere else in the war. But the Metaxas Line is designed to stop an attack from Bulgaria. It is not designed to stop an attack through Yugoslavia. And that is exactly what happens. General Erich von Manstein's forces push through the Monastir Gap, a mountain pass in southern Yugoslavia that leads directly into the Greek rear, bypassing the Metaxas Line entirely. It is the same logic that worked in France. Don't attack where the enemy is strongest, find the gap, pour through it, and collapse the entire defensive position from behind. By April 10th, German armored units are deep in the Greek interior, moving south. The British forces, positioned along the Aliakmon River line in central Greece, now find themselves in the same situation the French found themselves a year earlier. Their defensive line has been outflanked before it can be properly established. Units that were preparing to receive a frontal assault suddenly discover the enemy is appearing on their flank and rear.
General Wilson orders a withdrawal. It is the right decision militarily. But it means abandoning position after position, pulling back through terrain that offers little cover under constant German air attack from a Luftwaffe that owns the skies completely. The RAF, outnumbered, flying from airfields that are themselves under attack, does what it can. It is not enough. Greek and British soldiers retreat south through the mountain passes of central Greece. The roads are packed with military vehicles, refugees, horses, and the chaos of a campaign that is collapsing faster than anyone can organize a response to. But they are not broken. At Thermopylae, the same mountain pass where 300 Spartans held the Persian army in 480 BC, the New Zealand division, under General Bernard Freyberg, establishes a defensive line. The symbolism is not lost on anyone. For 3 days, the Anzac forces hold Thermopylae against the advancing Germans. They don't stop the German advance. Nothing can stop it now. But they slow it enough to allow thousands of Allied soldiers to reach the coast, where ships are waiting. This time, it is not Dunkirk, but it is close.
April 20th, 1941, 14 days after the German invasion began. In the mountains of Albania, the Greek army that has been fighting Italy for 5 months is still holding its positions. These men, who pushed the Italians back across the border, who captured Albanian towns, who humiliated one of Europe's great powers in front of the entire world, have not been defeated in battle. They are being abandoned by geography. With German forces pouring through central Greece from the north, with the British withdrawing toward the coast, the Albanian front has become irrelevant. The soldiers holding those positions are cut off, their supply lines are severed, their government is preparing to leave Athens. Everything they fought for over 5 months is collapsing behind them. Their commander, General Georgians Tsolakoglu, makes a decision that will define his place in history. He opens negotiations with the Germans. On April 20th, without authorization from the Greek government, Tsolakoglu signs an armistice with the Wehrmacht. The reaction in Athens is fury. The Greek government considers it treason.
Tolakoglu argues that further resistance will only mean the deaths of men who have already given everything, that the war in Greece is over regardless of what his army does in Albania, and that he is saving lives rather than throwing them away for nothing. History will judge him harshly, but the men in those Albanian positions, exhausted, surrounded, watching their country fall behind them, mostly feel something simpler.
Relief. Meanwhile, in Athens, the situation is desperate in a different way. The Greek government, King George II and his cabinet, has already left the capital, moving first to Crete and then to Egypt, where they will spend the rest of the war in exile. Before leaving, Prime Minister Emmanuel Tsouderos broadcasts a final message to the Greek people. He tells them that Greece has not been defeated, that the struggle will continue, that the values Greece has defended for 3,000 years cannot be conquered by any army, no matter how powerful. In the streets of Athens, people listen to the radio in silence. On April 27, 1941, 3 weeks and 1 day after the German invasion began, the first German motorcycle units roll into Athens virtually unopposed. The Acropolis is visible from the streets they drive through, the Parthenon. 2,500 years of continuous civilization, looking down on the soldiers of a regime that has existed for 8 years. A German officer climbs the Acropolis and raises the swastika flag over one of the most ancient and revered sites in the world. A Greek soldier named Konstantinos Koukidis. Accounts differ on the exact details, but the story has become part of Greek national memory. Refuses to hand over the Greek flag flying from the Acropolis. He wraps himself in it and jumps from the rock rather than let it fall into German hands.
Whether the story is precisely true in every detail doesn't matter. It captures something true about what Greece felt in those days. But the war is not quite over. On the island of Crete, where the Greek government has briefly sheltered, and where approximately 30,000 Allied troops have been evacuated from the mainland, something extraordinary is being prepared. Germany wants Crete. The island controls the eastern Mediterranean. It has airfields that can threaten British operations across the region, and Hitler, despite his frustration with the entire Greek campaign, understands its strategic value. He approves an operation that his commanders have been proposing for weeks: an airborne invasion, the largest parachute operation in military history. The men tasked with taking Crete are the Fallschirmjäger, Germany's elite paratroopers. These are some of the finest soldiers in the Wehrmacht, proven in combat in Norway, in Holland, in Belgium, confident, aggressive, superbly trained. They are about to meet the most ferocious resistance of their military careers. But that is a story for another video. In Athens, life under occupation begins.
The Germans are methodical and brutal in the way only a truly organized occupying power can be. Food is requisitioned for German forces, leaving the Greek population with almost nothing. The winter of 1941 to 1942, known in Greek history simply as the Great Famine, kills between 100,000 and 300,000 civilians in Athens and the surrounding region alone. People starve on the streets of a city that has existed for 3,000 years. But resistance begins almost immediately as well. On the night of May 30th, 1941, just weeks after the German occupation began, 2 young Greeks named Manolis Glazos and Apostolis Santas climbed the Acropolis under cover of darkness. They tear down the swastika flag. They are teenagers. The act is suicidal in its recklessness and extraordinary in its courage. German authorities immediately launch a manhunt. Both men are eventually caught and sentenced to death, sentences that are later commuted, and both survive the war. But for a moment, for one night, the flag of the occupier is gone from the most sacred place in Greece. And every Greek who hears about it understands what it means. You can occupy a country. You cannot occupy its soul.
The Greek campaign lasted 24 days. From April 6th to April 30th, 1941, Germany conquered a country that had been fighting for its survival since October of the previous year, a country that had already beaten one invader and was now overwhelmed by a second,
more powerful one arriving from a direction it couldn't defend. The numbers tell part of the story. Greece lost approximately 15,700 soldiers killed in the campaign against Germany. Britain and the Commonwealth lost around 12,000 men killed, wounded, or captured. German losses were approximately 1,500 dead, a fraction of what the campaign cost its opponents. On paper, it looks like a one-sided victory. But paper doesn't tell the whole story. The Greek campaign cost Germany something that doesn't appear in casualty figures: time. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, had been scheduled for May 15, 1941. The chaos in Yugoslavia, the need to conquer Greece, the logistical demands of moving and resupplying German forces across the Balkans, all of it pushed the launch date back by 5 critical weeks. Barbarossa finally began on June 22, 1941. 5 weeks late. Those 5 weeks matter more than almost any other 5 weeks in the entire war.
When German forces approached Moscow in late 1941, they were stopped not just by Soviet resistance, but by the Russian winter, the same winter that had destroyed Napoleon's army 130 years earlier. Temperatures that dropped to minus 40 degrees, ground so frozen that tank engines wouldn't start, soldiers in summer uniforms dying of cold before they could be killed by the enemy. If Barbarossa had started 5 weeks earlier, German forces would have reached the outskirts of Moscow before the winter hit. Whether they would have taken the city is impossible to say with certainty, but they would have had 5 more weeks to try. Some historians argue that the Greek campaign, Mussolini's unnecessary adventure, Hitler's reluctant intervention, may have been one of the factors that ultimately cost Germany the war in the Soviet Union. History rarely moves in straight lines, but the connection is there. A small country said no to an ultimatum in the middle of the night. It fought when it didn't have to. It resisted when resistance seemed futile, and in doing so, in forcing Germany to spend precious weeks conquering a nation that was never supposed to be a target, it may have altered the course of the most destructive conflict in human history. Greece was occupied for 4 years.
The occupation was brutal beyond description. The Great Famine, the deportation and murder of the Greek Jewish community, the destruction of villages, the execution of hostages. A country that had stood for 3,000 years brought to its knees by a regime that would itself be destroyed within 4 years of its greatest triumph. But Greece survived. The resistance never stopped. The government in exile never stopped. The soldiers who escaped to Egypt and the Middle East never stopped. They fought at El Alamein in Italy in the liberation of their own country in 1944. And on October 28th every year, the anniversary of Metaxas's single word in the middle of the night, Greece celebrates Ohi Day, No Day, a national holiday built around a refusal, around the moment a small nation looked at an ultimatum from a great power and decided that some things were worth fighting for regardless of the cost. That is the story of Greece in 1941. Not a story of victory, but a story of something that matters more than victory, the decision to fight anyway. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment about what you think. Did the Greek campaign actually delay Barbarossa and change the war? The debate is still open among historians. And subscribe. We are telling the complete story of the Second World War, battle by battle, country by country, from the first shot to the last. The next video is already coming. Don't miss it.